Don't take me from my daddy. I'm sorry. Was it my fault? Was it 'cause I asked for the extra poppy seed one?
We have to trust objective data here, not emotion. The father tested positive for opiates.
He's been clean 5 years. 14 clean tests in 2 years.
And one positive, counsel. It only takes one.
One unconfirmed screen. It was never sent for confirmation.
It's a laboratory result, not a rumor. My client watched this man lose himself to the pills once. She will not gamble her daughter on his word.
Nobody's asking her to gamble. We're asking the court to confirm the test before it takes a child away.
The test is the confirmation. That's what a test is.
He turned to the bench gently, which was the worst thing about him. Your Honor, I take no pleasure in this, but the data is the data. The child cannot be returned to that home. Ms. Rausch, anything before I rule? Nothing that outweighs a lab result, Your Honor. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. Then I'm prepared to rule. The judge's pen was already moving toward the order when the girl slid off a bench, too big for her, feet not reaching the floor, and crossed the well of the court before anyone could stop her. Travis Hoyt was 34, a union electrician, and the only person in that courtroom who understood. 2 seconds too late to feel like relief, exactly what his daughter had just handed him. The man they were talking about had been clean for 5 years. He had a calendar on his refrigerator with every single day marked in pen, one after another, 1,800 and some days, because he had learned in recovery that you do not count the years, you count the mornings. And every morning you did not use was a mark you got to make. At the bench, Judge Harriet Lowe had a pen in her hand and an order half signed under it. She was 59, and she had presided over that family court for a long time. And she had built a reputation on a single principle she was proud of, that a number is more honest than a story. A drug screen does not have a bad day. A drug screen does not want custody. She had signed a great many orders on the strength of a lab result, and she had been about to sign this one. And she had told herself, as she always did, that the objective thing was the kind thing, because the objective thing kept children safe. She looked at the little girl, who would not stop apologizing for a piece of bread, and Judge Harriet Lowe took off her reading glasses. It was a small motion. Nobody in the room understood it but her. For 30 years, she had looked at the people in front of her through those glasses, because you need them to read. And a courtroom is a place where you are always reading the file, the motion, the report, the number. She took them off, and she folded them, and she set them on the bench, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she looked at a father and a child with nothing between her eyes and them. And she thought in a cold rush that would not leave her for weeks, how many times have I signed without taking these off? Ms. Rausch, she said to the father's lawyer, and her voice was not quite steady, your client's exhibit list. Is there anything in it about a bakery? Here's what a court-ordered drug test actually is. And it is worth knowing because most people believe a positive result is a fact, and a positive result is not a fact. It is the first half of a question. When a family court suspects a parent, it orders drug testing, and it does not run the test itself. It names a private lab. In Wexford County, nearly all of it went to one company, TruePath Diagnostics. A urine screen has 2 stages. The first is an immunoassay, fast, cheap, and famous among every toxicologist alive for false positives. Cold medicine trips it. Prescription painkillers trip it. And poppy seeds, the ones on a bagel, in a muffin, baked into a loaf of bread, trip it because poppy seeds carry trace natural morphine, and a screen cannot tell trace natural morphine from anything else. That is why the federal cutoff for opiates was raised years ago from 300 nanograms to 2,000, specifically, on the record, to stop poppy seeds from ruining people's lives. The second stage is confirmation, GCMS, mass spectrometry. which is expensive and slow, and is the only test on earth that can tell the difference between a heroin user and a man who ate a slice of bread. It looks for a molecule called 6-monoacetylmorphine. Heroin leaves it behind. Poppy seeds never, ever do. TruePath used a cutoff of 300. And TruePath, as a matter of written policy, did not run the confirmation unless someone specifically requested it in writing. And the court never requested it, because the court believed positive was already the answer, which meant that the one test capable of telling a father apart from an addict was the exact test the lab left out to save money. Travis Hoyt had been clean 5 years. He'd gotten hooked on painkillers after a fall off a scaffold, gotten clean the hard way, gotten custody of his daughter Etta after the divorce on the condition that he test regularly through TruePath. He had agreed without a second's hesitation because he had nothing to hide, and because that little girl was the entire reason he had quit. He had tested negative 14 times in 2 years. There was a thing he said to Etta every night, going back to the hardest year, when she was 3 and he was 6 months clean and shaking, and she would ask it because kids can smell when a grown-up might not be there in the morning. She'd catch his hand in the dark and ask, "You'll be here when I wake up?" And he would say, every time, the same 4 words until they stopped being a promise and became just a fact of the house. "I always come back. That's what I do." He had said it through the withdrawals and the relapses of the early days and out the other side, and somewhere in there it had become the truest thing about him, the one thing the pills had never managed to make a liar of. He always came back. On a Thursday morning, running early, he took Etta to Dunmore's bakery before school, and they split a poppy seed loaf, and Etta, who loved the crunchy seeds, asked for a second piece, and he gave it to her, and he had a couple bites himself. 2 hours later, he walked into TruePath for his scheduled screen. Positive, opiates, 480 nanograms. No confirmation run. 1 line on a form. Positive, opiates. For any other parent, an unconfirmed screen might have been questioned. But Travis Hoyt was a man in recovery, and there is no prejudice on this earth cheaper or sickier than once an addict, always an addict. His ex-wife, Bianca, remarried now, to a man with money, in a nicer part of town, filed an emergency motion, and in a 15-minute hearing, the court pulled Travis's primary custody and handed Etta to her mother, on the finding of documented relapse, risk to the child. Etta was taken out of her father's house on a Friday afternoon, holding a backpack she had packed herself, and she had put the poppy seed in it. A little paper bag of it from the bakery, saved, because it was the last thing she and her dad had done together before everything went wrong, and she was 7, and she did not yet know it was evidence. That had been a month ago. This hearing, today, was the review, the chance to make it permanent. And it had been going exactly the way the lab's report guaranteed it would go, right up until a 7-year-old apologized for a loaf of bread. Colleen Roush was Travis's lawyer, and she worked out of a legal aid office and carried more cases than she could sleep on, and she had walked into that courtroom that morning expecting to lose. She did not expect to lose slowly, but the judge had just taken off her glasses and asked about a bakery. And Colleen Roush had been doing this long enough to know that when a judge changes the temperature of a room, you move. "Etta," she said gently, crouching to the girl's height, "you said the crunchy one, the poppy seed one. Where did you get it?" "Dunmore's, on the corner by my old school." Etta's chin wobbled. "Daddy always gets me one on early days. I had one, and then I asked for another one, and then Daddy took his test. Is that why? Did I do it?" "No, honey. You didn't do anything. But you might have just fixed everything. Do you know what day that was?" "Thursday. We only get bakery on early start Thursdays." And Travis Hoyt, who had not said a word he wasn't asked to say all morning, reached into his wallet with a hand that was shaking and pulled out a receipt he hadn't known he needed, from a shirt pocket he'd emptied into his wallet weeks ago and never cleaned out. Dunmore's Bakery, a Thursday 7:14 a.m. 1 poppy seed loaf, paid by card. 2 hours and 11 minutes before the timestamp on the TruePath screen. Your Honor, Colleen Roush said, and she was standing now. I'd move to admit this receipt, and I'd request an order compelling TruePath to run GCMS confirmation on my client's original sample and to produce their testing protocols. Because there is a well-documented phenomenon in forensic toxicology, and it has a name, and the name is the poppy seed defense. And it is the entire reason the federal government does not use the cutoff this lab used. At the back of the room, a man in a good suit who had come to observe on behalf of TruePath Fatherhood. Diagnostic stood up quietly and went out to the hallway to make a phone call. Etta watched him go and leaned over to her father and whispered, because whispering was how she'd learned to say true things in that room. Why is he in a hurry, Daddy? And Travis, who had spent 5 years in rooms learning to read the faces of people who had something to protect, said, because you just told the truth, baby. People in a hurry usually just heard one. The judge continued the hearing and ordered the confirmation, and for the first time in a month, Travis Hoyt let himself feel something that was dangerously close to hope, which he knew better than to do, because hope was the thing that had always come right before the fall. The next witness was a forensic toxicologist named Dr. Alan Pruitt, and Colleen Roush did not let him lecture, because she knew a jury of one tired judge would not sit through a chemistry class. She made him fight for it. Dr. Pruitt, the lab reported 480 nanograms of opiates. That's a real number, isn't it? It's not made up. It's real. It's also meaningless without context, which is the whole problem. Explain the context in a sentence. Poppy seeds contain natural morphine. Eat enough, a couple of servings, a poppy seed loaf, say, and your urine will screen positive for opiates for hours at levels that can run well past 480. That's why the federal cutoff is 2,000 now. This lab used 300. At 300, a man who ate a bagel fails. So a positive at that cutoff tells us he ate opiates. Heroin, or bread. Correct, and there is exactly one test that tells you which. It's called GCMS confirmation. It looks for a molecule called 6-MAM. Heroin produces 6-MAM. Poppy seeds never produce 6-MAM. Not once, not ever, not in the history of the chemistry. Pruitt turned to the judge without being asked. So if you want to know whether the man in this room is a relapsed heroin user, or a father who ate breakfast with his daughter, there is a definitive answer, and it lives in his original sample, and it takes one test to find. The lab that called him positive is the same lab that chose not to run it. Why would they not run it? Objection, said Bianca's lawyer. Calls for speculation. Withdrawn. Roush turned back to the witness. Dr. Pruitt, one more. If a lab wanted to catch more positives, not fewer, would you lower the cutoff or raise it? Lower it dramatically. And at a lower cutoff, do you catch more heroin users or more people who ate breakfast? More breakfast. That's the point. Heroin users show up at any cutoff. The only thing a low cutoff adds is the innocent. Pruitt folded his hands. You don't drop from 2,000 to 300 to catch addicts. Addicts fail at 2,000. You drop to 300 to catch everybody else. Roush let that sit. She did not need the toxicologist to say why a lab might want to catch everybody else. She needed the judge to be thinking it, and the judge, without her glasses, was thinking it. That afternoon, Travis's recovery sponsor testified, a plumbing contractor named Dale, who had 11 years clean, and had been getting Travis's 4 a.m. phone calls for 5 of them. And then the calendar came into evidence, the refrigerator calendar, and it turned out Travis had not been marking the days for himself. I don't mark them for me, he said when Roush asked. He was looking at his daughter. I mark them for her, so that someday, when she's grown and she understands what this all was, she can count them. Every one of those marks is a morning I picked her over the pills. She thinks a poppy seed cost her her dad. The truth is, she's the reason I haven't touched anything in 5 years. She saved my life every single day, and she has no idea she was doing it. There's a mark for the day she was born again, he went on quieter. That's how I think of it. Day 1 wasn't the day I stopped. Day 1 was the day I looked at her in that hospital and understood I'd been given a reason bigger than the wanting. Every mark after that is a mourning the reason 1. He had to stop. So when they told this court I relapsed, they didn't just call me a liar. They erased 1,800 mornings. They told my daughter that every one of those marks was fake, that her dad had been using the whole time and lying to her about it, and she believed it. That's the part I can't. She's 7, and she believed she'd been living with a man who was lying to her every single night because a piece of paper said so, and papers don't lie. Fix the paper, please. Not for me. Fix what the paper told my kid about me. Somewhere in the gallery, a woman who was not supposed to be crying put her hand over her mouth. It was the best day Travis Hoyt had had in a month, and Colleen Rausch knew, the way you know weather, that it could not hold because the lab had not yet been asked to defend itself. It had only been embarrassed. Embarrassment is not a ruling. That evening, in an office with a view, a man who had never once raised his voice in his professional life was reading the day's transcript. "Read me the toxicologist's line," said Clayton Price. The lab that called him positive is the same lab that chose not to run the test that would clear him. Price set the page down. He was 57, and he had built TruePath from a single county contract into 40, and he believed, in the load-bearing part of himself, that he ran a tight, defensible, scientifically standard operation, that every lab in the country used screening cutoffs, that confirmation was an add-on service everywhere, and that if courts didn't order it, that was the court's failure, not his. "Where does this go if it doesn't stop this week?" he said. "Legally? It's one custody case. We're not even a party." I didn't ask about the case. Say the sentence out loud. What does a judge see if she keeps pulling? The counsel took a breath. She sees that we used a 300 cutoff when the federal standard is 2,000. Then she asks how many parents in this county tested positive at that cutoff without confirmation. Then somebody with a subpoena asks why our fee schedule lists confirmation as an optional upgrade the courts never knew to buy, and why every unconfirmed positive triggers a paid monitoring program the parent has to fund themselves. A pause. That's the one that ends the contract in 40 counties. Not that we were wrong about one father. That we were built to be wrong because wrong pays weekly and right pays once. "Yes," said Clayton Price, and he turned his chair toward the window. "Thank you. That's the only honest sentence anyone in this company has said in years." He looked out at the lights of a county full of people who trusted a positive to mean what it said. "We are not going to be destroyed for one false positive. Everyone gets one false positive. That's noise. That's science. Juries forgive it. We are going to be destroyed if somebody proves we skipped the test that knew the answer. On purpose. 40,000 times. Because we make more money not knowing. So what do you want done? Nothing improper. I want the retention policy followed to the letter, for once. Not shortened, not extended. Exactly 90 days. Price turned back to the window. "And I want you to remind me why we don't run confirmation as standard. Say it out loud, so I remember it's a business decision and not an accident. Because a standard confirmation cuts the positive rate by more than half. And every positive is a monitoring enrollment. And monitoring is the recurring revenue. Running confirmation would clear people. Cleared people stop paying." "Yes," said Clayton Price. "Thank you. I needed to hear that it's a choice, because a choice I can defend as science. An accident I'd have to feel bad about." He said it as a risk. He did not yet know that the woman who had signed Travis Hoyt's result was, at that moment, sitting in her car in the TruePath lot with the engine off, unable to drive home, turning a blue chip over and over in her fingers. 2 things came apart in the days that followed, and the first one came apart in Travis Hoyt's chest. TruePath's lawyers moved fast. And they move the way these things always move, not with a lie, but with a policy. When the court's order to run GCMS confirmation on the original sample reached the lab, TruePath responded that the sample had been destroyed. Routine 90-day retention policy. The sample had been incinerated. 3 days before the order arrived. Nobody broke a rule. The calendar did it. The one piece of physical evidence that could have proven Travis Hoyt innocent, that could have proven it at any point in the previous month with a single test, was ash, and the ash was legal, and a message reached Travis through the machinery, gentle and deniable, that if he kept pushing this, his full testing history would be reviewed with additional scrutiny, and that older samples, hair samples, could be re-examined, and that a man with his history should think carefully about how many ways a lab could find something if a lab went looking. It was not a threat you could take to anyone. It was just weather. Then Bianca took the stand, and she was not a villain, which was the hardest part. She was a frightened woman who had loved an addict once and watched him disappear into it, and who had spent years bracing for the day he'd relapse, and who had gotten a piece of paper from a laboratory that said the day had finally come. She wept, and she said she wasn't trying to punish him. She was trying to protect their daughter, and that once you have watched someone you love choose the pills over you, you never fully trust the sober version again. And every word of it was true, and true was what made it lethal, because the judge could feel how much she believed it. 2 people Colleen Roush had never met were waiting outside her office that week, because word travels in a county where everyone knows someone who lost a kid to a piece of paper. Kip Marlowe had lost shared custody of his son 2 years earlier on a TruePath positive. "I take a blood pressure pill and a thing for my sinuses," he said, "screened positive for amphetamines. I told them it was the sinus medicine, pseudoephedrine. It's on the box, it does that. And they said the same thing they told everybody. If you're innocent, pay for the confirmation. $400 I didn't have to prove a thing I already knew, to a lab that had already told a judge I was a meth head." He set a folded court order on her desk, soft at the creases. "I see my boy every other weekend now. He's 9. He asked me last year if I was a drug addict because somebody at school said it, because it's in a file somewhere. I kept the sinus medicine box. 2 years. Because I knew someday somebody would need to see that a box of Sudafed took my son." Sandra Vale had gone the same way, on a poppy seed bagel and a cutoff of 300, and had never gotten her daughter fully back. "You know what the cruelest part is," she said. "Once you're positive, every clean test after that isn't proof you're clean. It's just proof you haven't been caught yet. That's how they say it. No relapse detected. Not innocent, just not yet. You can never test your way back to being trusted. There's no negative that undoes the positive. That's the trap. That's the whole trap." She looked at Roush. "I heard a little girl walked across a courtroom and whispered to her dad. I drove an hour to sit in a hallway on the chance it's real, because I have been waiting 6 years for a room to believe one of us." "How many of you are there?" Roush asked. Kip Marlowe and Sandra Vale looked at each other. "We found 4 in a church basement," Sandra said. 4 parents in 1 county, all positive at a cutoff the feds threw out, all told to pay for the truth or lose the kid. We stopped talking about it because it sounds insane out loud. Who believes a bag of poppy seeds took your daughter? She pushed the Sudafed box an inch across the desk. Then somebody said a judge took her glasses off. So here we are, with our boxes and our bagels, and our proof nobody ever wanted to see. And Travis Hoyt, watching the sample turn to ash, and the mother turn to tears, told Colleen Roush to stop fighting, to take a supervised visitation deal, to let him see Etta a few hours a week under watch, rather than drag his daughter through months of a war she'd have to keep hearing about. "They destroyed the one thing that proves you," Roush said. "I know how that looks, but the sample isn't the only evidence. The protocol is evidence. The cutoff is evidence. The receipt is evidence. And I'm a junkie, Travis said flatly. Not because he believed it, but because he had heard the world say it for 5 years and knew how the world would vote. That's the evidence they've got. And it beats a receipt every time because everyone in that room already decided who I was before I walked in. I did brave once. I got clean. It got me a positive test and a lost kid anyway. I'm done being brave. I'm going to be whatever kind of father they'll let me be. The supervised visits were through glass, in a county room built for exactly this. And on the second one, Etta pressed her hand flat to the pane and asked the question that would have finished a lesser man on the spot. Are you mad at me for the bakery? And Travis Hoyt, who was not allowed to hold his own daughter, put his hand up to match hers through the glass and said, Never, not once, not in a million years, and kept his voice level the entire time, which was the single hardest thing he had ever done sober, because his little girl was carrying a guilt that belonged to a corporation, and he could not reach through the glass to take it off her. You always used to say you come back, Etta said very quietly into the handset. You'd say it every night. I always come back. That's what I do. Is that still true? Even now? Even from here? And Travis, through a pane of scratched county glass, with a guard behind his daughter and a lie on his record and a burned sample and a mother's tears stacked against him, looked his 7-year-old in the eye and made himself say the only thing he had left that was true. Even from here, I always come back. That's what I do. You hold on to that, and I'll be back. I don't know how yet, but I will. Because that is the one thing about your dad that has never once been a lie. He pressed his palm harder against the glass. Not the pills, not the paper, not any of it. That part's real. I come back. He did not know yet how he was going to keep the promise. He only knew he had never broken it, and he was not going to start with her. It was Etta in the end who broke it open, the same way she'd broken it open the first time, by knowing a small true thing that no adult had thought to ask about. The lady at the lab was nice, she told Rausch, during a visit, apropos of nothing, the way children hand you the key without knowing it's a key. The one who did Daddy's test. I saw her before, at the church where Daddy goes to the meetings with the coffee. She had a chip like Daddy's, a round one, for not drinking. Colleen Rausch went very still. Etta, are you telling me the woman who tested your father goes to a recovery meeting, that she's in recovery too? She had the chip. Daddy said the chips are for how long you didn't drink or use. Hers was blue. Daddy's is different. Etta shrugged. She was nice. She's sad, though. She looked sad like Daddy looked before you helped. Renee Salter was 40, and she had been a lab tech at TruePath for 6 years, and she had 6 years sober, and Colleen Rausch did not send her a subpoena. She knew what a subpoena would do. It would put a lawyer and a threat in front of a frightened woman, and frightened people protect the paycheck. So she did the harder thing. She went to a meeting, the one with the coffee, the one Etta named, on a Tuesday night in a church basement that smelled like every church basement in America. Burnt coffee and floor wax and second chances. She did not go in. She stood at the back by the literature table, and she waited through the readings, and the shares, and the serenity prayer. And when it broke up and people were folding chairs, she found the woman with the blue chip clipped to her keys. And she did not say, I'm a lawyer, because that sentence ends the conversation. She said, there's a little girl who thinks she got her father taken away because she liked the crunchy bread. You ran his test. I think you know exactly what a poppy seed does. And I think you've known for 6 years what your chip is worth. And I think that's why you can't sleep. Renee Salter did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, I have run that screen 400 times and signed positive on people who are probably eating breakfast, because the confirmation slows the line and management tracks how many samples I clear an hour. And the standing instruction is you only run confirmation if it's requested in writing, and the courts never request it because they think positive is the end. I have a blue chip in my pocket. I know exactly what it does to a person in recovery To have the world decide you've relapsed when you haven't. I know, because I'd lie awake, being grateful nobody ever did it to me, while I do it to other people for a paycheck. She looked at Rausch. I've been waiting 6 years for somebody to ask me the right question. Nobody ever asked. You'd be amazed how long a person can carry a thing because nobody asks. She was quiet a moment. You want to know what finally got me out of the car? It wasn't you. It was that the little girl recognized me. A 7-year-old saw me at a meeting once and remembered my chip. Remembered I was one of us, and I signed her father positive anyway, without running the test. And she's the one who ended up believing in me, enough to tell her lawyer the nice lady from the lab had a blue chip. Renee Salter's jaw worked. A child I helped destroy is the reason anyone's going to fix this. I don't get to sit in the car after that. Nobody gets to sit in the car after that. In the days before the review resumed, the guardian ad litem assigned to Etta, a woman named Roberta Van, court appointed to represent the child's interest, who had signed off on the original removal because the lab report was in the file, and the file is what you trust, asked to meet with Colleen Rausch. She came in looking older than she had a month before. I recommended the removal, she said. That's my job. I read the file. The file said relapse. I recommended the child go to the stable parent. That's what the training tells you. Trust the documentation. She put her hands flat on the table. I have represented the interests of 200 children through that lab's reports. I have never once, in any of those cases, asked whether the positive was confirmed. It never occurred to me to ask because I thought a positive was a positive. If Travis Hoyt is innocent, then I have to sit with the fact that I don't know how many of the other 200 were, and neither does anyone else, because nobody asked. She looked at Rausch. I'm going to testify to that. Somebody who was on the wrong side of it should have to say out loud how easy it was to be on the wrong side of it. The review hearing resumed on a Wednesday, and it ran 4 hours, and people in Wexford County still talk about it. Renee Salter took the stand. In violation of a non-disclosure agreement she had signed and did not care about anymore, and she explained the cutoff, and the skipped confirmation, and the productivity metric, and the standing instruction, in the flat voice of a technician reading a procedure. And then she stopped being a technician. I want to say the part that's mine, she said. I'm in recovery. 6 years. And I have spent those 6 years signing a word, positive, onto people who are fighting the exact fight I fight every morning, and I told myself it wasn't my job to run the confirmation. It was the court's job to ask for it. That's a coward's math, and I did it anyway, because I have rent. Travis Hoyt's sample would have shown morphine, and no 6-MAM. It would have said bread, not heroin. I could have flagged it. I didn't. And then the company burned it on schedule, 3 days before you asked for it, and I wanted on the record that a 90-day retention policy is a very convenient thing to hide behind when your whole business depends on the answer staying unknown. And then, in the gallery, without being called, a man stood up holding a Sudafed box, and beside him a woman stood up holding nothing at all but a photograph of a daughter she saw every other weekend, and then a third person. None of them knew who had driven an hour on the chance the story was real. They did not say anything. They just stood so the judge could see how many of them there were. A small crowd of parents who had each been told, at the worst moment of their lives, that the truth was available for $400, and they should have known to ask. Ms. Rausch, Judge Lowe said, without looking away from them, who are these people? Parents, Your Honor. Every one of them lost custody or contact on an unconfirmed TruePath positive. I have 4 affidavits. I could have 40 if the court gave me a month. They are not part of Mr. Hoyt's case. I'd submit they are Mr. Hoyt's case. He is not an anomaly. He is a business model. Then Colleen Rausch put TruePath's own fee schedule on the screen, a line item, in tidy type, GCMS confirmation, optional add-on service. The one test, she said, that could tell a father from an addict. The one test that looks for the molecule only heroin makes. On this company's own price list, it is an optional upgrade. The court never bought it, because the court never dreamed positive wasn't already the truth. Which means, Your Honor, that in Wexford County, the difference between keeping your child and losing your child came down to a test this lab sold as an extra and hoped nobody would order. Clayton Price was there, and he made the only argument he had, and it was not stupid, and everyone in the room felt it land. Every lab in America uses screening cutoffs, he said. Confirmation is standard as an add-on everywhere. If the courts of this county did not order confirmation, that is a failure of the courts, not of my company. I ran a compliant laboratory. You want to destroy a business that provides a service this county asked for, over one man who, I'm sorry, but it must be said, has a documented history of exactly this drug. Mr. Price, before you answer the judge, one number. Rausch did not sit down. How much does a GCMS confirmation cost your lab to run? Not to sell, to run. I'd have to check with about $30. It's on your own cost sheet. $30 to run, and you list it to the courts at $200 as optional. So the test that tells a father from an addict costs your company $30, and you chose, as policy, not to spend it, and then to burn the sample that could have carried it, on a schedule so convenient it destroyed Mr. Hoyt's proof. 3 days before we asked, $30, Mr. Price. That's what a man's daughter was worth against your margin. Mr. Price, said Judge Harriet Lowe, why did you use a cutoff of 300 when the federal standard is 2,000? The 300 cutoff is more sensitive. It's more sensitive to poppy seeds. That's what it's more sensitive to. The federal government moved to 2,000 specifically to stop catching people who ate a muffin. And you moved the other way, to catch more of them. And everyone you caught became a weekly paying customer of your monitoring program until they could prove a negative you'd already made it impossible to prove. She was not raising her voice. It had gone very flat and very cold. I have signed hundreds of orders on your reports. I trusted the number over the person because I told myself the number couldn't lie. The number didn't lie, Mr. Price. You just never ran the number that told the truth. And Judge Harriet Lowe took off her reading glasses a second time. And this time, everyone in the room understood what it meant. Give me the order, she said to her clerk. The original one, the one I almost signed a month ago. They handed it up. She looked at it for a moment, the order she had been one pen stroke from making permanent, the order that would have handed a little girl away on the strength of a number nobody checked. And she thought again of the thing that had not left her in weeks. The glasses she had never once taken off, the years of faces she had read through a lens instead of seen. Then she tore it in half, and the sound of it was the loudest thing that had happened in that courtroom all day. The court vacated the change of custody, restored Travis Hoyt's primary custody effective immediately, and struck the positive result and the finding of relapse from his record entirely. And then Judge Harriet Lowe did the larger thing, the thing that turned one custody case into a reckoning. She ordered a review of every custody and parental rights matter in Wexford County, decided on an unconfirmed true path positive, and referred the company's cutoff policy, its confirmation as upsell fee structure, and its retention practices to the state attorney general and the state's forensic laboratory accreditation board. For the record, she added, and she was looking at the little girl now, not the lawyers. The court finds that the child in this matter did nothing wrong. She ate a piece of bread with her father, the way a child should be able to, and a machine that gets paid to find something found it, and a room full of adults who should have known better believed the machine over a man. She will grow up knowing the court said so. Then she looked at the parents still standing in the gallery, the Sudafed box, the photograph, the strangers who had driven in on a rumor, and to the people standing in the back of my courtroom. I do not know your cases, but I signed a great many orders through a pair of glasses I never once took off. And if any of you were sentenced by a number this court trusted more than it trusted you, then this court owes you the same look I am finally giving Mr. Hoyt. The review I am ordering is not a favor. It is a debt. Leave your names with my clerk." Bianca Frost did not appeal. Whatever she had believed walking in, she had watched her daughter's whole future turn on a receipt from a bakery. And there is a limit to what a frightened person can keep believing once they have seen the machine work in the light. Renee Salter was fired within the week for breaching her NDA and hired within a month by the State Accreditation Board as a witness and consultant on exactly the practices she'd spent 6 years signing off on. When someone asked her why she'd thrown away a stable job for a case that wasn't hers, she said the only thing she had left to say about it. "It was mine. Every positive I ever signed without running the test was mine. I just finally stopped pretending they belonged to the paper." She kept the blue chip in her pocket. She said it weighed less now. Kip Marlowe's case was among the first the review reopened. His son's school file was corrected before the next report card. Sandra Vale got a hearing date, 2 years late, which she said was the first time in 2 years anyone had let her testify to being clean instead of ordering her to prove it. And on a Friday afternoon, the same day of the week Etta had been taken, which nobody planned and everybody noticed, Travis Hoyt signed one piece of paper, the good one, and walked his daughter out of the county building and home. That night, he made dinner, and he read her a book, and when he turned out the light, she caught his hand in the dark, the way she used to before all of it, and asked him the things she had asked every night for as long as she could remember, back when he was still fighting to stay, when she had been too little to know why the question mattered so much to him. "You'll be here in the morning?" "I always come back," Travis Hoyt said. "That's what I do. Even from the glass place. Even from the glass place. I told you I would." "You did." She was already half asleep. "I kept the seeds, the poppy ones, in case anybody needed them again." "Keep them," he said. "You never know who's going to need to prove a thing about a piece of bread." And he sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing went slow, the way he had for 5 years of marked-off mornings, and he did not go anywhere, because that was the whole point. That was the one thing he did. Let this be the thing that outlives the headlines. A machine that gets paid to find something will always find something. It does not need to lie. It only needs to set the threshold low enough to catch the innocent, skip the one test that would tell them apart from the guilty, and then let the oldest prejudice we own do the rest. That a person who once fell can never again be believed when they say they are standing. They caught a father with a cutoff the federal government abandoned on purpose. They sold the test that would have cleared him as an optional upgrade. And when a court finally asked for the proof, they had already burned it. On schedule, entirely within the rules, it took a 7-year-old who saved a paper bag of poppy seed and a receipt from a corner bakery to prove that the only thing positive in that report was the profit. So to the powerful who assume the people they label cannot be believed, the truth is often still sitting in a child's backpack, in a paper bag, saved for no reason but love. To anyone who has ever had a machine decide who you are before you opened your mouth, a number is not a verdict, and a screen is only the first half of a question. And to the rest of us who hear the word positive and stop thinking, somewhere in your county there is a lab with a fee schedule, and on that fee schedule the test that tells the truth costs extra, and nobody is buying it. Travis Hoyt kept the calendar on the refrigerator, and he kept marking the mornings, one after another, for the day his daughter is grown enough to count them. But the review the judge ordered is still open. TruePath still holds contracts in 39 other counties. And somewhere tonight, there is another parent, clean and terrified, holding a piece of paper that says positive. It's one, and no receipt, and no toxicologist, and no 7-year-old brave enough to walk across a courtroom and whisper the truth. Somebody has to keep asking for the second half of the question.